The hum of 1,000 hushed conversations filled the grand exhibition hall, a symphony of ambition and innovation. Fluorescent lights, usually harsh, were softened by designer fixtures, casting a warm glow on the polished surfaces and sleek displays. Among the sea of tailored suits and confident smiles, a small, unassuming figure stood out, Amelia Hayes, her worn but impeccably clean dress a stark contrast to the designer attire surrounding her. Adjusted the collar of her son's slightly too big blazer. Leo, at just 7 years old, was a whirlwind of contained energy, his bright, intelligent eyes scanning the room with a curiosity that belied his tender age. He clutched a sleek, minimalist device, his latest brainchild, with a reverence usually reserved for ancient artifacts. "Mom, is Mr. Harrison really going to be here? He promised to consider my prototype." His voice, though young, carried an unusual clarity, a hint of the sharp intellect that often left adults speechless. But now, the ghost of Amelia Hayes was stirring, and the whispers about her son's remarkable intellect at the showcase were growing louder. Eleanor had dismissed it as idle chatter, but the combination of Julian's sudden interest and the mention of Amelia sent a cold premonition down her spine. The boy was 7. The timing was too precise. Her mind, as sharp and calculating as ever, began to connect the dots. Julian's sudden inquiries, the intensity in his gaze that her contacts reported seeing at the showcase, he had seen the resemblance. He knew. Amelia offered a weary but genuine smile, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and apprehension. He said he would, "Sweetie, just do your best. Like always. Remember, it's about sharing your ideas, not just impressing people." She knew it was easier said than done. Every step of their lives felt like a tightrope walk, balancing Leo's extraordinary gifts with the harsh realities of their humble existence. His genius was a beacon, but it also painted a target on their backs, inviting scrutiny and, sometimes, envy. A surge of icy panic mixed with simmering rage, her carefully constructed masterpiece. Her control over Julian's life and the Vance legacy was in jeopardy. She had eliminated any perceived threat to Julian's ascent. She wouldn't let a past mistake, a foolish summer dalliance, unravel everything. Not now, when the Vance empire was at its peak. Their small booth, tucked away in a less prominent corner of the Rising Stars section, was meticulously organized. Leo's presentation board, filled with intricate diagrams and elegant equations, showcased his invention, a low-cost, highly efficient kinetic energy harvester designed to power small devices in remote areas. It was an idea that had sprung from his observations of a broken toy car and Amelia's struggles with their perpetually flickering light bulb. Eleanor excused herself from the luncheon, her smile unwavering, but her eyes now hard and calculating. She retreated to her study, a room filled with heavy mahogany and the scent of old leather. She made a series of discreet calls. Amelia's past was a tightly sealed vault, its contents buried under layers of self-preservation and painful memories. She had arrived in the city years ago, a terrified young woman carrying a secret, determined to build a new life for herself and her unborn child, far from the shadows of a past betrayal. Every decision since then had been meticulously calculated, every penny saved, every sacrifice made, all for Leo. He was her universe, her masterpiece, her reason for enduring. She worked 3 part-time jobs, as a barista, a freelance editor, and an evening cleaner, to keep a roof over their heads and ensure Leo had access to the learning resources he devoured like air. Their apartment was small, their meals simple, but their home was always filled with the hum of Leo's experiments and Amelia's unwavering love. "I need information," she stated, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Amelia Hayes, every current detail, where she lives, where she works, her financial situation, and the boy, Leo, his school, his activities, his guardians, everything." She paused, her voice dropping. "And I need to know what Julian has been asking about me. Specifically, my activities 7 years ago." Across the expansive hall, a presence arrived that seemed to draw the light, or perhaps simply absorbed it. Julian Vance, CEO of Vance Industries, moved through the crowd with an almost predatory grace. His dark suit, impeccably tailored, seemed to ripple with quiet power. His chiseled features, usually set in an expression of intense focus, were tonight relaxed into a practiced, polite smile as he greeted associates and investors. Vance Industries, a global conglomerate, dominated sectors from renewable energy to advanced AI, a testament to Julian's ruthless intelligence and relentless drive. Her contacts, well-paid and loyal, understood the urgency in her tone. Within hours, she had a comprehensive report. Amelia's life was still humble, a constant struggle, yet she had managed to nurture an extraordinary talent in her son. The details of Leo's genius, confirmed by academic reports and showcase reviews, only solidified Eleanor's fear. A genius of Julian's caliber, unacknowledged, outside her control, was a liability. Worse, he was living proof of her ultimate deception. Julian Vance was a man who lived in the future, always 3 steps ahead of the curve. He viewed life through the lens of data and opportunity. His personal history, a carefully curated narrative of success and self-made wealth. Emotional entanglements were a liability, a weakness he had long excised from his life after a singular, devastating incident in his youth, an incident he barely remembered. Shrouded in hazy details and a profound sense of having been used, he rarely looked back, focusing instead on conquering the next frontier, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Eleanor formulated a new plan, swiftly and ruthlessly. The first step was to discredit Amelia. If Julian was beginning to trust her, Eleanor would make sure no one else did. She instructed a network of PR agents and online smear specialists to quietly leak damaging, fabricated stories about Amelia's past, painting her as unstable, unreliable, and emotionally manipulative, a mother unfit to raise a prodigy. The stories would be subtle, whispered across forums and obscure news sites, enough to sow doubt, but not enough to be traced back to her. Tonight, however, a sense of obligation, rather than genuine interest, had brought him to the innovation showcase. His company was a major sponsor, and a brief appearance was a necessary chore. He exchanged pleasantries, his mind already drifting to the next board meeting, the next acquisition, the next grand strategy. The second step was to exert control over Leo. If Amelia proved uncooperative, Eleanor would target the child directly. She had connections to elite boarding schools with rigid admission policies, and even to less scrupulous institutions. If Leo could be placed in a highly structured, isolated environment, Eleanor could control the narrative and keep him away from Julian, away from the truth. She even considered the possibility of challenging Amelia's parental fitness, fabricating evidence of neglect or instability. It was a dangerous game, but Eleanor played to win. As he made his way towards the rising stars section, a faint murmur reached his ears, growing louder. "Did you see that kid? He's brilliant. Unbelievable for his age." Julian, accustomed to the hype surrounding seasoned professionals, paid little mind. He was searching for Mr. Harrison, a potential collaborator, when his gaze snagged on a small crowd gathered around one of the less conspicuous booths. Meanwhile, back at Vance Industries, Julian was still reeling from Amelia's story. The evidence his own investigators were now unearthing corroborated every painful detail. Old, dusty legal documents from a shell corporation connected to Eleanor's personal trust, detailing an agreement of non-disclosure with a significant payout to Amelia Hayes. Call logs between Eleanor and a specialized reputation management firm known for its aggressive tactics. The weight of his aunt's betrayal settled on him, a cold, hard stone in his gut. The anger was no longer just for himself, but for Amelia, for the solitary struggle she had endured, for the constant fear she had lived under. He saw him then, a boy, impossibly small, standing confidently next to a large presentation board, his tiny finger tracing a complex circuit diagram. The boy's hair was a riot of dark, unruly curls, his eyes a startling shade of blue, a shade that inexplicably snagged a forgotten chord deep within Julian. But it wasn't just the eyes. It was the intense focus, the slight furrow in his brow as he explained, with astonishing clarity, the intricacies of his invention to a visibly impressed Mr. Harrison. He ended the meeting with Amelia, promising to speak again soon, his eyes conveying a silent apology, a nascent understanding. As Amelia led Leo out of the building, a sense of relief washed over her. She had told him. The secret was out. But that relief was quickly replaced by a new, more immediate dread. Eleanor Vance would not take this lightly. Amelia felt a subtle shift in the air, a prickling sensation that told her she was being watched. A sense of foreboding tightened around her. She noticed a black sedan, tinted windows, parked subtly down the street from their apartment building later that evening. She dismissed it as paranoia, but the unease lingered. Julian stopped dead. The boy, even at a distance, held an undeniable air of familiarity. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through him. He dismissed it as a trick of the light, an overactive imagination. He was a man of logic, not sudden, inexplicable emotions. The next morning, an anonymous email arrived in her inbox, containing a subtly doctored photograph of her from years ago, making her look disheveled and distraught, accompanied by a single, chilling line. Some secrets are best left buried. Amelia. For everyone's sake. Eleanor was making her move. Then he saw her. Julian, too, felt the first ripple of Eleanor's counterattack. A prominent board member, a staunch ally of Eleanor's, called him, subtly questioning his recent distractions and hinting at unprofessional entanglements that could jeopardize Vance Industries' image. Julian knew exactly what Eleanor was doing, planting seeds of doubt, isolating him, preparing the battlefield for a full-scale war. Standing beside the genius child, her hand gently resting on his shoulder, was a woman. Her back was mostly to him, but as she turned slightly, her profile came into view. Dark, flowing hair, pulled back simply, framed a delicate jawline. There was a weariness in her posture, a subtle tension in her shoulders. But as she looked down at the boy, a soft, radiant smile bloomed on her face, illuminating her features. The battle for Leo, for the truth, had truly begun. Julian and Amelia were no longer just individuals caught in a past deception. They were targets. Eleanor, the formidable mastermind, had unleashed her power, and the stakes had escalated exponentially, threatening not just their reputations, but their very freedom and, most importantly, Leo's future. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of the Vance empire. And then she looked up, her gaze sweeping the room, and for a fleeting, agonizing second, her eyes met Julian's. The anonymous email, with its subtly doctored photograph and chilling directive, landed in Amelia's inbox like a venomous snake. Her stomach churned as she stared at the image, a distorted version of herself from years ago, looking distraught and unkempt, designed to undermine her credibility. The accompanying text: "Some secrets are best left buried. Amelia. For everyone's sake." Left no doubt about its origin. Eleanor Vance was not subtle in her aggression, only in her means. A cold dread seeped into Amelia's bones, confirming her worst fears. This wasn't just about Julian discovering the truth. It was about Eleanor crushing anyone who dared to challenge her meticulously crafted reality. Time fractured. The hum of the hall faded into a distant echo. The polite smiles of the attendees blurred into an indistinct canvas. All that existed was her. Across the city, in his pristine office, Julian received his own taste of Eleanor's machinations. The call from the prominent board member, subtle yet pointed in its questioning of his recent distractions and unprofessional entanglements, was a clear warning shot. Eleanor wasn't just observing, she was actively moving to isolate him, to turn his own allies against him. The board member's tone had been carefully neutral, but Julian recognized the underlying message: your focus is wavering. Julian, and Eleanor, is watching. The insinuation that his personal life could jeopardize Vance Industries, the empire he had built with blood, sweat, and a calculated lack of sentimentality, was a direct strike at his perceived weakness. Amelia. Julian's initial fury, directed squarely at Eleanor, now expanded to a profound frustration. He was a man of action, of direct confrontation. But Eleanor's tactics were insidious, designed to create doubt and slowly erode trust. He knew he couldn't fight her alone, especially not when she held such sway over his company and his personal history, and Amelia, as he now understood, was facing an equally, if not more, terrifying assault. The name, a whisper from a long-buried past, clawed its way to the surface of Julian's mind. He remembered the name. He remembered the face. He remembered the impossible softness of her touch, the surprising passion of a kiss under a sky full of stars during a brief, whirlwind summer internship years ago. He remembered, too, the abrupt, inexplicable end, the accusations, the shame, the fierce denial. and the pervasive sense of having been manipulated, of having made a terrible, irredeemable mistake. He had tried to forget her, had consciously walled off that part of his life, dismissing it as a youthful folly, a misjudgment he'd overcome. He called Amelia that evening, his voice tight with urgency. "Amelia, did you receive anything strange today? An email, perhaps? Or a subtle warning from someone unexpected?" But now she was here, and she was standing next to that boy. Amelia paused, surprised by his immediate perception of the danger. "An email," she confirmed, her voice low. "A doctored photo, a threat. She's starting, Julian, just like she did 7 years ago." The boy, whose dark, unruly curls mirrored his own from childhood photographs. The boy, whose startling blue eyes were an exact, chilling replica of his own. The boy, who possessed an intellect that, even from a distance, resonated with Julian's own prodigious mind. "I know," he said, the grimness in his voice palpable. "I've had a similar, gentle reminder from one of my board members. Eleanor is moving. She's attempting to discredit both of us, to isolate me and to make sure you appear unstable." He exhaled slowly. "We can't fight her separately, Amelia. She's too powerful, too entrenched. We need to work together." A cold dread, sharper than any business failure he had ever faced, coiled in Julian's gut. It couldn't be. It was impossible. He had been told, he had believed, that the incident had been nothing more than a fleeting distraction, a misunderstanding swiftly resolved. There were no lasting consequences. He had moved on. He had built an empire. The suggestion hung in the air, thick with their complicated history. Work together. Amelia wanted to reject the idea outright. Her instinct was to retreat, to shield Leo from the powerful forces now converging on them. But the fear of Eleanor, of her ruthlessness, was a stronger motivator. She knew what Eleanor was capable of. Alone. She was vulnerable. With Julian. There might be a chance, but the evidence, standing stark and undeniable before him, screamed a different truth. The familiar curve of her lips as she smiled at the child, the protective gesture of her hand on his shoulder. And then, Leo. "Julian," she began, her voice hesitant. "You abandoned me. You left me to face this alone once before." Leo, who was now looking directly at Julian, a small and curious frown on his face, as if sensing the silent seismic shift occurring in the powerful man's world. The boy's eyes, those impossibly familiar eyes, held a depth and wisdom that made Julian's breath catch. "And I believed a lie, Amelia," he countered, his voice raw with regret. "A lie she spun so convincingly it warped my memories. I was blind, I was foolish, and I was wrong. But I'm not blind now, and I won't let her do this to us again." To Leo, his voice hardened with unwavering resolve. "She kept me from my son for 7 years. I won't let her take him from me now. Or from you." Julian felt a dizzying surge of conflicting emotions, disbelief, a crushing sense of betrayal from a past he thought he understood, and a terrifying, unbidden rush of paternal instinct that struck him with the force of a physical blow. His words, honest and devoid of his usual corporate detachment, resonated with Amelia. She could hear the pain, the genuine desire to rectify a colossal wrong. "What do you propose?" she asked, a fragile truce forming between them. "This is my child." The words formed in his mind, silent, profound, and utterly horrifying in their implication. Every carefully constructed wall around his emotions, every meticulously maintained barrier against vulnerability, crumbled in an instant. The aloof CEO, the man who prided himself on his control, felt his world shatter into a million pieces. "We pool our resources," Julian stated, his strategic mind already at work. "My investigators are the best. They're already digging deeper into Eleanor's activities. You have the first-hand account of her threats. The details of the agreement you signed. Leo, with his unique abilities, might even inadvertently give us an edge." He took an involuntary step forward, drawn by an invisible current, his eyes never leaving Leo. His gaze flickered to Amelia, who had stiffened, her smile fading, her eyes widening in recognition, a flicker of something akin to fear, then defiance, hardening her features. She saw him. She knew he saw her, and she knew what he was seeing. Leo, blissfully unaware of the intense conversation, was indeed already contributing. He had been quietly working on a new coding project. developing an advanced data encryption algorithm he called Aegis Shield. He was convinced it could protect any information, making it virtually unhackable. While Amelia had encouraged his passion, she hadn't fully grasped its potential beyond abstract science. Julian, however, understood. She had handled Amelia years ago. A small problem. Efficiently dealt with. The girl was poor, easily intimidated, and, crucially, proud. A calculated payment, a few well-placed threats, and the carefully crafted lie about Julian's true feelings. And Amelia had vanished, just as planned. Eleanor had convinced Julian that Amelia was a calculating gold digger who had merely used him for access, leaving him with a deep-seated aversion to emotional attachments, ensuring his focus remained solely on Vance Industries. It had worked perfectly. Julian had grown into the unfeeling, formidable CEO she had always wanted him to be, a solitary titan whose only passion was expansion and power. The secret of Leo's existence, the one loose end, had been securely buried, or so she believed. Their first joint meeting was awkward. They met at a neutral, discreet location, a private study room in a quiet university library, a place where Amelia felt more at ease. Julian arrived with binders of documents, his eyes tired but sharp. Amelia, despite her apprehension, brought the flimsy original copy of the non-disclosure agreement Eleanor had forced her to sign. The air around them thickened, charged with unspoken history, with shocking revelations. The world outside their immediate circle seemed to cease to exist. Julian Vance, the titan of industry, was no longer contemplating market trends or stock values. He was grappling with a truth that threatened to redefine his entire existence. The genius baby, standing so innocently beside the familiar girl, was not just a groundbreaking innovator. He was a living, breathing testament to a past stolen, a future irrevocably altered. "This is the core of it," Julian said, tapping the document. "A legal smokescreen designed to isolate you. But it also reveals Eleanor's direct involvement, her signature disguised, but a match for other documents I've found." Julian's jaw tightened, his knuckles white as he clenched his fists at his sides. The shock had morphed into a cold, burning resolve. He needed answers, and he would tear down every wall, expose every lie, to get them. His child. His son. The echo of those words resonated in his soul, shattering the silence of years. As they began to share information, the walls between them slowly, imperceptibly, began to crumble. Julian listened intently as Amelia recounted the sheer terror she had felt facing Eleanor, the crushing loneliness of single motherhood, and the constant struggle to provide for Leo while nurturing his genius. He saw the resilience, the fierce love that had driven her through every hardship. He saw not a victim, but a survivor, a formidable woman in her own right. His eyes met Amelia's again, this time with an intensity that promised a storm. She met his gaze, unflinching now, a silent challenge passing between them. The unexpected encounter had just become the first tremor of an earthquake. Amelia, in turn, saw a different Julian, not just the aloof CEO, but a man wrestling with a profound sense of loss and betrayal. He expressed his regret, his shame at having believed Eleanor's lies, and his desperate yearning to connect with the son he never knew. He spoke of his own isolated childhood after his parents' death, how Eleanor had stepped in, becoming his sole confidant and guide. He admitted his blind spot, his absolute trust in her, which now felt like a gaping wound. The grand exhibition hall, moments ago a vibrant tapestry of innovation, now felt like a mausoleum of Julian Vance's past. He stood rooted to the spot long after Amelia and Leo had disappeared into the thinning crowd. The lingering scent of polished wood and technological optimism replaced by the metallic tang of disbelief in his own mouth. His mind, usually a fortress of logic and strategic foresight, was in chaos, bombarded by images of a child's piercing blue eyes and a woman's guarded, defiant gaze. "She controlled everything after my parents died," Julian admitted, his voice rough. "My education, my social circle, even my romantic interests. She always said it was for my protection, to ensure the Vance legacy continued untainted." He looked at Amelia, a wry, bitter smile touching his lips. "She succeeded in making me a titan in business, but a barren landscape in my personal life." Amelia, the name echoed, a haunting refrain from a life he had meticulously compartmentalized and buried for years. She'd been a footnote, a blurred photograph in a discarded album, an inconvenient truth swept under the rug of ambition. The narrative he'd clung to was simple, a fleeting summer infatuation, a misunderstanding, a clean break. He had been young, foolish, perhaps even naive. And then he had moved on, building an empire that left no room for sentimentality or regret. Their vulnerability with each other, born of shared pain and a common enemy, began to knit a fragile bond. They began to see each other not as figures from a painful past, but as co-conspirators in a high-stakes battle for their child. Leo became their unspoken common ground, the very reason they had to succeed. But the boy, Leo, one evening, during a strategy session at Amelia's apartment, Julian, for the first time in years, stepping outside his gilded cage, Leo wandered in, his laptop clutched in his hands. "Mom, Mr. Vance, I finally figured out the bug in Aegis Shield. It's because some older network protocols are inherently insecure, but if we reroute through a quantum entanglement proxy, it would be almost impossible to trace." He launched into a rapid-fire explanation. Drawing complex diagrams on a whiteboard, he had insisted Amelia buy him. The uncanny resemblance was not just a trick of the light, not a figment of a stressed mind. It was a searing, undeniable truth stamped on the child's features, a mirror of his own boyhood reflection, the dark, wild curls, the intense, almost preternaturally intelligent gaze, the very aura of focused brilliance. It all screamed Vance. And then there was Amelia, the woman he had tried so hard to forget, standing by the child, a silent testament to a bond Julian could only guess at. Julian's eyes widened, a flicker of professional awe replacing his personal torment. "Quantum entanglement proxy," he murmured, a rare smile gracing his lips. "Leo, that's revolutionary. A secure, untraceable communication channel." He retreated from the hall, the polite smiles and murmurs of his associates washing over him unheard. His driver opened the door to his sleek, armored sedan. But Julian merely waved him off, choosing to walk. He needed the biting night air to clear his head, to bring order to the swirling maelstrom within him. His usual route home, a blur of city lights and familiar landmarks, was now a tunnel. His vision narrowed, focused only on one burning question. How? Amelia, used to Leo's brilliance, simply smiled. "He's been tinkering with it for weeks. Says it's for super-secret messages." Back in his penthouse suite, a space designed for minimalist efficiency and panoramic views of the city he dominated, Julian didn't head for his study. He went straight to the secure, personal server room, a place few knew existed. His fingers, usually so swift and decisive on a keyboard, trembled slightly as he began to type. Discretion was paramount. He needed answers, but he needed them quietly, untraceably. Julian looked at Leo, then at Amelia. A thought sparked. "Leo, if you could make this Aegis Shield protocol work for real-time communication, would it be untraceable? Impossible to intercept?" He initiated a deep-dive background check on Amelia Hayes. He pulled up public records, cross-referenced academic databases from years ago, sifted through social media profiles, though Amelia's was conspicuously sparse, and tapped into his network of discreet, high-end private investigators. The objective was clear every detail of her life since their last encounter, particularly the circumstances surrounding Leo's birth and early childhood. He didn't want theories. He wanted facts, dates, names, the cold, hard data he always relied on. Leo nodded emphatically. "Absolutely. It's like sending a message through a wormhole. No trace, no residue." Meanwhile, in a small, cozy apartment several miles away, Amelia was trying to calm her racing heart. She had seen Julian, and he had seen Leo. The fleeting moment their eyes met across the crowded hall had been a silent explosion, a recognition that transcended years and distance. The air had crackled with unspoken accusations, with a past she had meticulously buried, and a future she now feared was about to be violently unearthed. A plan began to crystallize in Julian's mind. If they could communicate and coordinate their moves against Eleanor using Leo's untraceable protocol, they would have a significant advantage. Eleanor thrived on information and control. A secret, secure channel would blindside her. "Mom, are you okay?" "You're quiet," Leo observed, his small hand instinctively reaching for hers as they walked hand in hand down the bustling street towards a bus stop. He was always so perceptive, so attuned to her moods. Their fragile alliance solidified into a determined partnership. Julian's resources and strategic acumen combined with Amelia's intimate knowledge of Eleanor's threats and Leo's accidental brilliance, they began to map out Eleanor's network, identifying her key allies on the board, her silent partners in the legal and PR fields. They understood that Eleanor wouldn't stop at subtle threats. She would escalate. They needed to be ready. Amelia forced a smile, squeezing his hand. Just a little tired, sweetie. It was a long day, wasn't it? But you were amazing. Mr. Harrison was so impressed. She tried to sound enthusiastic, but her voice wavered slightly. The sight of Julian had reopened old wounds, scars she thought had long healed. Eleanor, meanwhile, was growing increasingly frustrated. Her smear campaign against Amelia was having limited effect. The fabricated stories were circulating, but Julian seemed unaffected, even more focused. And Julian himself remained stubbornly uncommunicative, avoiding her calls, canceling their meetings. The cold silence from him was more unnerving than any open defiance. She sensed a shift, a new, unforeseen variable. The private investigators reported Amelia and Julian had been seen together, discreetly, more than once. The revelation sent a fresh wave of fury through her. They were uniting. The thought was intolerable. She remembered him vividly now. The ambitious intern, brimming with raw intelligence and an almost arrogant charm. Their summer fling had been a dizzying, passionate whirlwind, a stark contrast to her usually cautious nature. She, a shy, earnest student, had been completely swept off her feet by his intensity, his vision, his unexpected tenderness. And then, the abrupt, inexplicable silence, the unanswered calls, the sudden, cold dismissal from his family's powerful circle, followed by veiled threats and accusations of gold digging from a formidable figure she dimly remembered as his aunt. She had been devastated, humiliated, and utterly alone, carrying a secret that would change her life forever. She fled, picking a city far enough away to disappear, determined to raise her child far from the man who had, in her mind, abandoned her. She instructed her legal team to begin drafting documents to challenge Amelia's parental rights, citing financial instability and Leo's unusual behavior as grounds for her to gain temporary custody, or even full guardianship of Leo, framing it as being in the child's best interest, given his extraordinary intellect. She knew the courts often favored stability and resources, and the Vance name carried immense weight. This was her final, most potent weapon. If she couldn't control Julian, she would control his heir. And if she couldn't control Amelia, she would simply remove her from the equation. Life had been a relentless uphill battle. Leo's early signs of genius were a joy, but also a tremendous challenge. He skipped developmental milestones, spoke in full sentences by 18 months, and by 4, was devouring advanced physics textbooks. The public school system, bless their efforts, simply couldn't keep up. Amelia had cobbled together a patchwork education for him, sacrificing everything. She spent her nights researching advanced online courses, applying for obscure grants, and begging local university professors to mentor him, often facing skepticism or outright dismissal due to his age. The constant financial strain was a dull ache in her bones, but Leo's bright mind, his boundless curiosity, and his innocent joy in discovery made every sacrifice worth it. He was a gift, a miracle, a fierce reminder that she had made the right choice, even if it had come with immense personal cost. Amelia and Julian, working late into the night, poring over documents, discussing strategies in hushed tones over Leo's secure communication channel, found themselves drawing closer. The professional facade occasionally cracked, revealing moments of shared laughter, of mutual frustration, of a growing, undeniable respect. Julian saw the vibrant, intelligent woman he had almost forgotten, a woman whose resilience mirrored his own, but tempered with a profound empathy he lacked. Amelia saw the powerful, guarded man begin to open up, revealing a surprising depth of feeling, a fierce loyalty to his newfound son. Now, that choice was being threatened. Julian Vance was a force of nature, a man who got what he wanted. If he suspected the truth, he would not rest. And Amelia knew, with a chilling certainty, that he would want Leo. Her heart pounded with a primal fear, the fear of losing the one thing that truly mattered to her. They were no longer two separate individuals, wronged by a common enemy. They were a nascent family, forged in the fires of betrayal, united by a shared purpose to protect Leo and expose the truth, no matter the cost. The confrontation was inevitable. And now, armed with truth, strategy, and Leo's genius, they were ready. Back in his penthouse, Julian stared at the glowing screen. The first reports were trickling in. Amelia Hayes, no significant family history. Graduated top of her class from a small state university before her internship. Disappeared from the public record for a year, then reappeared in the city, taking on various low-paying jobs. Her son, Leo Hayes, born 7 years ago. No father listed on the birth certificate, no record of a father's involvement. The fragile truce between Amelia and Julian had solidified into a formidable partnership, forged in the crucible of Eleanor's escalating aggression. Days bled into nights, filled with hushed conversations over Leo's Aegis Shield communication channel, the faint glow of laptop screens illuminating their determined faces. They mapped out Eleanor's intricate web of influence, the pliable board members, the discreet legal counsel, the powerful media contacts, all bound by loyalty, fear, or financial incentive to the matriarch of the Vance empire. Every piece of information, no matter how small, was meticulously analyzed. Every lead pursued with relentless focus. The pieces, though still fragmented, were beginning to align in a terrifying mosaic. 7 years ago, the timing was too precise to be coincidence. Julian's top investigators, now fully briefed on the personal stakes involved, worked tirelessly. They uncovered more than just the non-disclosure agreement. They found a series of shell companies and offshore accounts Eleanor had used to funnel money, not just to Amelia, but to other individuals whose lives she had subtly manipulated to protect Julian's image or consolidate her own power. They discovered carefully redacted financial records that, when pieced together, showed large sums transferred to a private clinic known for questionable ethical practices around the time of Leo's birth, hinting at a failed attempt to acquire confidential medical information about Amelia. The depths of Eleanor's machinations were staggering, revealing a pattern of control that extended far beyond Julian and Amelia. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to revisit that summer, the one he had tried so hard to erase. He remembered the old family estate, the sprawling gardens, the stifling expectations. And then, Amelia. Her quiet strength, her unexpected wit, the way she made him laugh. He remembered a late-night conversation by the pool, the feel of her hand in his as they walked through the moonlit grounds. A sense of belonging he hadn't felt before or since. Amelia, drawing on her suppressed memories, provided crucial details, the precise dates of Eleanor's visits, the subtle nuances of her threats, the names of the intimidating lawyers who had presented the papers. Her clear, first-hand account, combined with Julian's objective evidence, painted a damning picture. They understood that Eleanor's ultimate goal was not just to silence them, but to gain control of Leo, either by discrediting Amelia as an unfit mother or by forcing Julian to accept a guardianship arrangement that would give Eleanor proxy control over the brilliant heir. Why had it ended so abruptly? He remembered a furious confrontation with his aunt, a powerful, domineering woman who managed many of the family's more delicate affairs. She had been livid, accusing Amelia of being a schemer, of trying to trap him, of being entirely unsuitable. He remembered feeling confused, then angry, then a crushing sense of disappointment. He had been told Amelia left, simply vanished, unable to handle the pressures of his world. He remembered feeling used, foolish for having allowed himself to be vulnerable. He had swallowed the narrative whole, let it harden him, and poured all his energy into building Vance Industries, ensuring no one could ever blindside him again. Leo, meanwhile, continued to be their unwitting but invaluable asset. While playing a complex online strategy game, he noticed a subtle, almost imperceptible data anomaly within the network Julian's team was monitoring. "Mr. Vance," he chirped over a video call, pointing to a flickering line on his screen. "This isn't just a normal firewall ping. It's like a heartbeat, but trying to hide. It's trying to listen in, but it's too careful." But now, a chilling suspicion began to take root. What if he hadn't been told the full truth? What if the misunderstanding was a lie? The thought sent a jolt of ice through him. He trusted his aunt implicitly. She had been a surrogate mother after his own parents died young, but her protectiveness, he now realized, could also be a weapon. Julian's eyes widened. A heartbeat! He opened his eyes, his gaze hardening. He pulled up an old, grainy photo from his personal archives, a picture of him at 7, with the same wild curls, the same intense blue eyes. He placed it side by side with a candid photo of Leo from the exhibition, discreetly snapped by one of his contacts. The resemblance was undeniable, almost frightening in its clarity. This was not a coincidence. This was fact. Oh, yes? Leo insisted, like someone's checking if the line is clear, but so subtly, most systems wouldn't even register it. My Aegis knows, though, it's a ghost, his son. A child he had unknowingly had, a life he had been absent from. The weight of that realization settled on him, heavy and cold. Amelia, the woman he had dismissed as a fleeting mistake, had carried this burden alone, had raised their son in obscurity, while he built an empire. The unfairness of it, the colossal injustice, ignited a cold fury within him. Julian immediately understood. Eleanor was attempting to hack their secure communications, trying to find a loophole in Leo's quantum entanglement proxy. This confirmed her desperation and the sophisticated level of her ongoing surveillance. It also gave them an unexpected opportunity. He picked up his phone, dialing a number he rarely used. Get me everything on the current location of Eleanor Vance. And then, I need to know everything about her activities 7 years ago. Every phone call, every meeting, every transaction. Leave no stone unturned. His voice was low, laced with an unfamiliar edge. Leo, Julian said, a glint of cunning in his eyes. Can you create a decoy heartbeat? Something that mimics the real one, but leads to a dead end. He looked at Leo's picture again. The image of his son, a stranger, a genius, a boy he was only just discovering. A profound sense of loss mingled with an unyielding determination. He had been robbed. Amelia had been wronged. And Leo had been denied a father. That would not stand. Julian Vance was a man who prided himself on control, on knowledge, on logic. And right now, the most fundamental truth of his life had been kept from him. He would unravel every thread, expose every lie, and reclaim what was rightfully his. The seeds of doubt had blossomed into an undeniable conviction, setting him on a collision course with a past he now knew was far more complicated and far more vital than he had ever imagined. The days that followed the innovation showcase were a blur of frenetic activity for Julian Vance. His empire, once his sole focus, now felt like a secondary concern, a mere backdrop to the storm brewing in his personal life. His top-tier investigators, accustomed to corporate espionage and competitor analysis, found themselves sifting through a different kind of data: old university records, obscure online forums, and the meticulously guarded privacy of a woman who had clearly tried to vanish. This was the breakthrough. They would use Leo's genius to feed Eleanor carefully crafted misinformation, lulling her into a false sense of security while they prepared their true assault. They decided on a strategy that was both bold and calculated: a public confrontation at the annual Vance Industries shareholder meeting. It was the only arena where Eleanor's power could be directly challenged, where Julian could use the weight of corporate governance against her, and where the truth, once revealed, could not be easily suppressed. The reports that landed on his desk were startling, each fragment of information chipping away at the carefully constructed narrative of his past. Amelia Hayes, an exemplary student, a bright mind, but with no significant family connections or financial backing. The internship at his family's foundation, usually a coveted position, was offered to her through an unusual, expedited process. Then the abrupt departure, a ghosting that Julian had been told was Amelia's own doing, her inability to cope with the Vance lifestyle, the birth of Leo, exactly 9 months after their last known interaction, sealed the deal. The pieces weren't just aligning, they were interlocking with chilling precision. The stakes were astronomically high. If they failed, Julian faced a potential vote of no confidence from his manipulated board, losing control of his company. Amelia faced a devastating legal battle for Leo, potentially losing her son to Eleanor's guardianship. And Leo, the innocent genius, would be caught in the crossfire, his future dictated by a woman who saw him as a mere pawn in a power game. Their lives, their reputations, and Leo's very future hung precariously in the balance. What truly unhinged him were the subtle hints of manipulation surrounding his own memories. The summer he spent at his family's estate had always been hazy, particularly the end. He remembered arguments, his Aunt Eleanor's stern warnings, and a sense of profound disappointment. But the precise details of his parting with Amelia were elusive, like trying to grasp smoke. His investigators confirmed that his aunt, Eleanor Vance, had indeed taken an unusually active interest in his relationships during that period, and her communication records showed numerous calls to his personal assistant at the time and a private detective agency just before Amelia's disappearance. It wasn't concrete proof of malicious intent, but it was enough to ignite a cold fire of suspicion in Julian's gut. The more he delved, the more a disturbing pattern emerged. His aunt, always a pillar of strength and guidance after his parents' untimely deaths, had also been fiercely protective of the Vance legacy, almost obsessively so. He had always interpreted it as love, as her wanting the best for him. Now, he began to see a darker shadow, one of control and ruthless pragmatism. The narrative of Amelia as a calculating opportunist, a story he had accepted without question, began to unravel, replaced by a growing horror that he had been a blind participant in a cruel deception. The thought of Eleanor, his steadfast protector, being the architect of such a lie twisted his stomach. It was a betrayal far deeper than any corporate espionage. The day of the shareholder meeting arrived, crisp and tense. The grand auditorium, usually filled with a buzz of excitement and corporate ambition, felt charged with an almost palpable undercurrent of suspense. Eleanor Vance, radiating her usual regal composure, sat in the front row, occasionally exchanging clipped smiles with keyboard members. She looked entirely confident, assured that her chess pieces were in place. He needed to see her, to speak to her, not through intermediaries or corporate channels, but face to face. He needed to understand the truth from her, to see the pain, the anger, the resignation in her eyes that would confirm what his gut now screamed. He wanted to witness the raw emotion he had been denied, to gauge the depth of the wound she had carried alone. Only then could he truly piece together the shattered fragments of his own past. Julian, impeccably dressed, took the stage, his expression grim but resolute. He opened the meeting with standard corporate reports, but his voice carried a different gravitas tonight. He paused, looking directly at Eleanor, a silent challenge passing between them. He orchestrated a meeting, not through a direct, aggressive summons, which would only drive her further away, but through a calculated, professional pretense. He used his influence to arrange a follow-up interview for Leo with Mr. Harrison, the senior executive who had been impressed at the showcase. The interview, Julian ensured, would be held at the Vance Industries downtown office, a place Amelia would have to bring Leo. It was a bait he knew she couldn't refuse, a gamble on her fierce maternal instincts. Before we move to the next agenda item, Julian announced, his voice echoing through the auditorium, I need to address a matter of critical importance to Vance Industries, and indeed, to the very integrity of its leadership. A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience. This was not on the agenda. Amelia received the email from Mr. Harrison with a mixture of excitement and dread. An official interview for Leo at Vance Industries. It was a monumental opportunity, a potential game changer for Leo's future, a recognition of his genius on a scale she could only dream of. But it was also Julian Vance's company. Her heart hammered against her ribs at the thought. After the fleeting, intense glance at the showcase, she knew this wasn't mere coincidence. He knew, or at least, he suspected. The carefully constructed piece of their lives felt fragile, poised on the brink of shattering. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to flee, to protect Leo from the inevitable storm that Julian Vance would bring. Yet, Leo's eager face, his dreams of seeing his invention brought to life, silenced her fears. She couldn't deny him this chance. Eleanor's eyes narrowed imperceptibly, a flicker of suspicion finally crossing her serene face. Mom, isn't this great? Leo bubbled, his face alight with anticipation. They want to hear more about the kinetic harvester. Maybe they'll even fund it, Julian continued, his voice steady. 7 years ago, a series of events transpired that profoundly impacted my life, and through a deliberate and malicious deception, affected the very future of this company. I am speaking, shareholders, about a meticulously orchestrated betrayal, a secret kept hidden by someone within our ranks, someone who sought to control my personal life for their own agenda, believing it would benefit Vance Industries. Amelia managed a shaky smile. It's wonderful, sweetie. A big step for your project. She pushed down the rising tide of anxiety. She had guarded her secret for 7 years, building a life of quiet resilience. She wouldn't let him, or anyone, threaten Leo's future. She would be strong. She had to be. The weight of her past decisions, the sacrifices she had made, pressed down on her. She had chosen a life of obscurity and struggle over the potential chaos of revealing Leo's parentage, believing it was the only way to shield him. Now, that choice was being put to the ultimate test. He gestured to a large screen behind him. For years, I believed I had no child. I believed a woman named Amelia Hayes, who I briefly knew, had simply vanished, uninterested in any lasting connection. I was led to believe she was a gold digger, a schemer. His gaze found Amelia, seated discreetly near the back, her face pale but resolute. This was a lie, a calculated fabrication designed to sever a bond and to keep from me the existence of my son. The day of the meeting arrived, thick with unspoken tension. Amelia dressed meticulously, choosing a simple but elegant pantsuit, determined to project an image of calm professionalism, not the scared, heartbroken girl he once knew. She braided her dark hair tightly, a symbolic gesture of her resolve. Leo, excited and oblivious to the undercurrents, chattered happily about his presentation slides, his enthusiasm a poignant contrast to Amelia's churning nerves. A gasp swept through the room. Whispers erupted, the dignified hum turning into a cacophony of shock and confusion. Eleanor's face, for the first time, lost its composure, her eyes widening in disbelief. Then cold fury. Vance Industries' lobby was a monument to corporate power, all gleaming glass, polished steel, and hushed efficiency. Amelia felt a familiar knot of intimidation tighten in her stomach. The sheer scale of Julian's world was overwhelming, a stark reminder of the chasm between their lives. A friendly receptionist directed them to a private conference room. Mr. Harrison was already there, his smile genuine, his eyes twinkling at Leo, seemingly unaware of the true drama about to unfold. And then Julian Vance walked in. I present to you Leo Hayes, Julian said, his voice imbued with profound pride, as Leo, coached by Amelia, confidently walked onto the stage, holding a miniature replica of his kinetic energy harvester. The boy, dressed in a smart blazer, looked at the crowd with curious, intelligent eyes, an undeniable miniature version of Julian. The air in the room seemed to crackle, thickening with an unspoken history. Julian, dressed in a sharp, dark suit that seemed to enhance his imposing stature, moved with the same controlled power she remembered. His eyes, those piercing blue eyes that were so strikingly similar to Leo's, met hers, and for a split second, the polished CEO persona faltered, revealing a raw intensity she hadn't seen in years. It was the gaze of a man who had been blindsided, who was searching for answers, and who would stop at nothing to get them. The murmurs intensified, turning into a stunned silence as the resemblance became apparent to everyone. Mr. Vance, Amelia said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. Thank you for having us. She clasped her hands together, a subtle tremor betraying her outward calm. Leo, Julian continued, is a prodigy. He is my son, and he is living proof of a truth that was stolen from me, and from him, by my aunt, Eleanor Vance. He nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a beat too long before shifting to Leo. Leo, it's a pleasure to finally meet you properly. Your invention is truly remarkable. His voice was deep, resonant, and when he spoke to Leo, there was an almost imperceptible softening, a genuine warmth that surprised Amelia. She noticed the slight tilt of his head, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners, mannerisms she had once found endearing, now resurfacing with a painful familiarity. The words hit like a bomb. Eleanor sprang to her feet, her face contorted with rage. Julian, how dare you? This is preposterous, a disgusting fabrication. You've gone mad. Her voice, usually controlled, was shrill, betraying her panic. The initial part of the meeting proceeded professionally. Leo, a natural showman when it came to his passions, eloquently explained his prototype, answering Mr. Harrison's technical questions with ease. He even anticipated a few, offering solutions before the questions were fully formed. Julian observed, mostly silent, his eyes rarely leaving Leo. A strange, profound expression on his face, a mixture of awe, regret, and a simmering protectiveness. Amelia watched him, her protective instincts on high alert, her mind racing, trying to anticipate his next move. Every twitch of his brow, every shift in his posture, was scrutinized. "Oh, I assure you, Aunt Eleanor, I've never been saner," Julian retorted, his voice chillingly calm. "And I have the evidence." "Amelia, please." When Leo had finished his presentation, bursting with pride, Mr. Harrison excused himself, citing another meeting, a prearranged exit that Amelia immediately recognized. He gave Leo an encouraging nod, a genuine promise of future consideration. And then they were alone. The polite facade shattered. The hum of the air conditioning suddenly felt deafening in the charged silence. Amelia walked forward, clutching the original non-disclosure agreement. Her hands trembled, but her voice was clear and strong as she recounted Eleanor's threats. The forced signature, the cold, calculated payment. The audience listened, captivated, as the story of the powerful matriarch's dark deception unfolded. Julian turned to Amelia, his voice dropping, though still calm, controlled, yet imbued with an undeniable urgency. "Amelia, we need to talk. About the past." His eyes were unyielding, demanding the truth. Julian then brought up the digital evidence, the detailed reports from his investigators, tracing the funds from Eleanor's shell companies to the private investigators and legal firms involved in the cover-up. He displayed snippets of internal emails and communication logs, carefully redacting sensitive information, but leaving enough to show Eleanor's direct instructions to discredit Amelia and control Julian's personal life. The ghost heartbeat Leo had detected was projected on the screen, revealing Eleanor's attempts to spy on their communications, further proving her active, ongoing deception. Amelia's heart leaped into her throat. She gripped the edge of the conference table, her knuckles white, her nails digging into her palms. "I'm not sure what you mean. Mr. Vance, we're here to discuss Leo's project." She tried to sound dismissive, to build a wall of professional detachment, but her voice was thinner than she liked. "This is all a malicious smear campaign," Eleanor shrieked, her usual poise completely gone. "She's a liar. He's delusional. They're trying to destroy my reputation." She looked wildly at the board members, appealing to their loyalty. "Don't believe these absurd accusations. Don't play coy," Julian said, his eyes narrowing slightly, a flicker of impatience crossing his features. "We both know why you're here, why we're here. This isn't about Leo's project, not entirely. It's about Leo." He gestured towards the boy, who was now engrossed in drawing circuit diagrams on a notepad, humming softly to himself, lost in his own world. "And it's about what happened 7 years ago." But Julian was prepared. "On the contrary, Aunt Eleanor," he said, his voice cold as ice, "we have anticipated your desperate attempts to deny the truth. What you are witnessing is not a smear campaign, but a meticulously planned exposure, an exposure that was facilitated by an untraceable communication protocol, designed by none other than Leo." He nodded to his son, who beamed, oblivious to the deeper meaning. "Nothing happened 7 years ago that concerns you," Amelia retorted, her voice hardening, a fierce protectiveness rising within her, hot and undeniable. "You made your choice clear back then." The bitterness of that memory, sharp and acrid, filled her mouth. "And for those of you who might still doubt," Julian continued, turning to the board, "I have here irrefutable proof of paternity." He presented a sealed document, a DNA test result, confirming Leo's biological relationship to him with 99.99% certainty. The document was then passed around amongst the stunned board members. Julian flinched, a flicker of pain crossing his face, a genuine shock that caught Amelia off guard. "My choice!" "What choice?" "Amelia, I was told you left, that you simply vanished, that you wanted nothing to do with my family, my life." His voice was low, laced with a bewildered hurt. The last vestige of Eleanor's control shattered. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled entirely. The board members, many of whom had blindly supported her for years, now looked at her with a mixture of shock and disgust. Her manipulation, her ruthlessness, had not only affected Julian, but had jeopardized the very integrity of the company's leadership. The thought of a child being kept from his father, and the lengths Eleanor had gone to achieve it, was abhorrent. "And I was told you wanted nothing to do with me," Amelia shot back, the raw hurt of the past bubbling to the surface, unstoppable now. "That I was a mistake, a gold digger, that you were too busy building your empire to care about a silly summer fling." Her voice cracked slightly, the bitterness of those memories stinging her throat, and she felt the hot rush of tears welling in her eyes, tears of long-suppressed anger and humiliation. "You think I would willingly walk away? After everything you think I just vanished?" The confrontation had reached its boiling point. Eleanor, seeing her carefully constructed world collapsing around her, made one last, desperate lunge. She rushed towards Julian, her hand raised, a wild fury in her eyes, intending to strike him, to silence him, to regain some semblance of control. But before she could reach him, a security guard, alerted by Julian's subtle nod, intercepted her, gently but firmly restraining her. Leo, sensing the dramatic shift in the adult conversation, looked up, his brow furrowed with concern, his small face a mirror of innocent apprehension. "Mom, is everything okay?" Julian watched, unblinking, as his aunt, the woman who had once been his anchor, was led away, her furious protests echoing through the stunned silence of the auditorium. The silence was then replaced by a profound collective exhale from the shareholders. The truth, ugly and painful, had been laid bare. The mastermind had been exposed. Amelia immediately softened her voice, forcing a bright, reassuring smile. "Everything's fine, sweetie. Just grown-up talk." She gave Julian a pointed glare, a silent warning to shield Leo from the brewing storm. The showdown was over, but the resolution was yet to be fully realized. Julian looked at Amelia, a profound sense of relief and a burgeoning respect shining in his eyes. Their alliance, born of necessity, had faced its ultimate test and emerged victorious. He then looked at Leo, his brilliant, innocent son, standing confidently on the stage, the future suddenly clear, brimming with possibilities. Justice, albeit a harsh and public one, was finally within reach. Julian took a deep breath, his expression morphing from accusatory to something more earnest, more desperate. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table, his gaze fixed on her. "Amelia, please, look at him." He nodded towards Leo. He's exactly like me. The eyes, the hair, the mind. Tell me, Amelia, is he my son?" His voice was barely a whisper, a plea for the undeniable truth. The echoing silence in the Vance Industries auditorium, shattered by Eleanor's shrill protests, slowly gave way to a collective murmur, then a rising hum of conversations. The sheer audacity of Julian's public revelation, coupled with the undeniable evidence and the visual proof of Leo's resemblance, had left the shareholders stunned. As Eleanor Vance was escorted away, her furious glare a dying ember, Julian remained on stage, his posture unwavering, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the stunned attendees. Amelia stood beside him, her hand instinctively finding Leo's, a quiet strength radiating from her as the truth finally, fully, saw the light of day. Leo's eyes lit up. "A digital mirage, of course, even better. I can make it feed her false information, like a digital breadcrumb trail to nowhere." The aftermath was swift and merciless, a testament to Julian's meticulous planning and Eleanor's utter collapse. Within hours, news of the dramatic shareholder meeting spread like wildfire through the financial and social circuits. The story, initially whispered as corporate scandal, quickly transformed into a compelling narrative of family betrayal, hidden paternity, and a genius child. Journalists, sensing the colossal human drama behind the corporate veil, scrambled for details. The directness of the question, stripped of all pretense, hit Amelia like a physical blow. She froze, her carefully constructed defenses crumbling under the weight of his gaze, the intensity of his raw emotion. She had rehearsed this moment countless times in her mind, preparing witty retorts, impassioned denials, cold dismissals. But faced with his raw plea, the words died in her throat. The truth was too monumental, too ingrained in Leo's very being. To deny, Julian wasted no time. He held an immediate press conference, flanked by Amelia and, reluctantly, a curious Leo. With uncharacteristic transparency, Julian laid bare the full extent of Eleanor's deception. He presented the detailed reports from his investigators, tracing the fraudulent transactions, the payments to the reputation management firms, and the clear directives to silence Amelia. He spoke of the emotional manipulation he had endured, the blind trust he had placed in his aunt, and the profound regret of the lost years with his son. His voice, usually guarded, now carried a raw honesty that resonated with the public. She looked at Leo, then back at Julian. The truth was written plainly on all their faces, an undeniable lineage etched into the boys' features. Denying it would be a futile, cruel lie, a perpetuation of the very deceit that had separated them. Amelia, despite her innate shyness, bravely stepped forward to share her side of the story. Her account of Eleanor's threats, of being a frightened, pregnant student forced into silence, struck a deep chord. Her narrative of resilience, of fighting to raise her brilliant son against overwhelming odds, transformed her from a perceived gold digger into a sympathetic figure, a symbol of quiet strength against powerful injustice. She presented the original non-disclosure agreement, its terms now revealed as a testament to Eleanor's cruelty, not Amelia's avarice. "Yes," she whispered, the single word a profound admission, a surrender of her deepest secret. It was a release, a terrifying leap into the unknown, but also a relief. "He's your son, Julian." The public reaction was immediate and overwhelmingly in their favor. Sympathy for Amelia and Leo poured in, coupled with outrage at Eleanor Vance's calculated cruelty. Social media buzzed with hashtags like Chaucer Justice for Leo and Chaucer Vance Betrayal. Julian, once seen as an unapproachable corporate titan, gained an unexpected layer of humanity, his vulnerability resonating with a public tired of corporate opaqueness. A profound silence descended upon the room, thick and heavy, broken only by the faint scratching of Leo's pencil on paper, a tiny, rhythmic sound that seemed to mock the seismic shift in the adult's world. Julian closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the confirmation, the undeniable weight of a truth he had suspected. But now, finally, knew for certain. A wave of emotions crashed over him. Profound sorrow for the lost years, crushing anger at the deception, and an overwhelming surge of paternal love he had never known he was capable of feeling. He envisioned 7 years of Leo's life, unfolding without him, a hollow ache growing in his chest. Legally, Eleanor's position was untenable. The evidence Julian presented was damning. The non-disclosure agreement, forced under duress and founded on deceit, was swiftly deemed null and void. The payments from shell companies, the documented attempts to discredit Amelia, and the clear intent to separate a child from his parents amounted to a litany of serious offenses. Beyond the corporate governance violations, there were potential charges of harassment, fraud, and even emotional battery. "Why?" he asked again, his voice raw, almost a gasp. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you hide him after all these years?" The anger was now directed not at her, but at the injustice of it all. The board of Vance Industries, reeling from the scandal and facing shareholder outrage, moved quickly to distance themselves from Eleanor. An emergency vote was called, and Eleanor Vance was unanimously stripped of all her executive titles, board seats, and honorary positions within the company and its various charitable foundations. Her meticulously cultivated reputation, built over decades, crumbled in a matter of days. The social elite, who had once admired her sharp wit and formidable presence, now viewed her with disdain. Invitations to exclusive galas dried up. Her calls went unanswered, and the carefully curated facade of her life disintegrated. Amelia's eyes flashed with renewed defiance, the pain in her heart morphing into righteous anger, stronger now that the secret was out. "Hide him? You think I hid him, Julian? Your aunt, Eleanor Vance, she came to me. She told me you wanted nothing to do with me. She told me you thought I was a schemer, a gold digger. She threatened me, Julian. She told me if I ever tried to contact you or your family, she would use every resource of the Vance empire to make sure I lost everything, including my future and any chance of a career. She even showed me documents, legal papers, making it clear I was to disappear. She made me sign papers, promising to keep silent. She said you agreed with her, that you implicitly trusted her judgment." The words poured out, a torrent of long-held resentment and fear. "I was pregnant, Julian, terrified, alone. What was I supposed to do, fight the Vance empire as a scared, penniless student with no family, No support, tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of long-suppressed fury and the exhaustion of bearing such a heavy burden for so long. Eleanor, confined to her sprawling estate, became a pariah. Her former allies abandoned her, unwilling to be associated with such a public disgrace. Her legal team, once formidable, now advised her to settle, to withdraw from public life, to mitigate the inevitable legal battles. The sheer weight of evidence, combined with Julian's newfound public support, left her with no recourse. The woman who had meticulously controlled Julian's life, who had so ruthlessly severed a family bond, found herself utterly powerless, isolated, and facing the consequences of her actions. The irony was not lost on Julian. Eleanor's desire for absolute control had ultimately led to her absolute downfall. Julian stared at her, aghast, his own face mirroring the shock on hers. Eleanor, his aunt, the woman who had raised him, who he had trusted implicitly, his moral compass for so long. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with a horrifying clarity that made his blood run cold. The vague memories, the sudden break, the accusations against Amelia, all orchestrated. A puppet master pulling their strings, manipulating two lives for her own agenda, her possessiveness, her ambition for him, her absolute control over his early life. It all made a terrible, twisted kind of sense. She had severed their connection, erased their shared history, and effectively kidnapped his son from his life before he even knew he existed. The realization was a physical blow, leaving him breathless. Amidst the chaos of public scrutiny and legal maneuvering, Julian's focus remained steadfastly on Leo and Amelia. He arranged for discreet, highly specialized child psychologists to work with Leo, ensuring the media attention wouldn't overwhelm him. Leo, remarkably resilient, seemed more fascinated by the sudden influx of attention than burdened by it. Though Amelia remained watchful, he still called Julian Mr. Vance. But there was a new ease in his interactions, a tentative curiosity that warmed Julian's heart. She orchestrated this, Julian breathed, his voice dangerously low, a primal growl rumbling beneath the polished veneer. She kept you from me. She kept Leo from me, all these years. His eyes, normally cold and analytical, burned with a furious, protective fire that was new, unfamiliar. He looked at Leo, still sketching, still innocent, and a wave of overwhelming regret washed over him. 7 years. 7 years of missed milestones, of silent birthdays, of being an absentee father to a child he never knew he had. The profound injustice of it all was almost unbearable. Julian also arranged for a secure, comfortable new home for Amelia and Leo, far from their cramped apartment, yet still close enough to Leo's preferred school and mentors. He ensured Amelia had legal counsel, financial support, and access to all the resources she might need. He wasn't just fixing a past wrong, he was building a foundation for a future. Amelia watched him, a flicker of something new in her eyes, not just anger, but a hesitant recognition of his pain, his shock. The shared betrayal, for the first time, seemed to bridge the vast chasm that had separated them. A fragile connection began to form, forged in the crucible of their shared deception. Amelia, initially overwhelmed by the whirlwind, gradually began to heal. The weight of the secret, the years of fear and struggle, began to lift. She found solace in Julian's genuine remorse and his unwavering commitment to Leo. The raw anger she had harbored slowly transformed into a cautious trust, then a burgeoning respect. She saw the powerful CEO not just as the man who had abandoned her, but as a man who had himself been deeply wronged, a man fighting desperately to reclaim what was lost. Their shared ordeal had forged an unexpected bond, a silent understanding that transcended their tumultuous past. "I tried," Amelia said, her voice softer now, tinged with a deep weariness that spoke of years of struggle. "After Leo was born, I almost broke. Every time he asked about his father, my heart shattered. I wanted to tell you. But I was so scared. Scared of her. Scared of your family. Scared of what they might do to me, to Leo. I just wanted to protect him, to give him a normal life, away from all of that power and influence that could crush us. I couldn't risk it." One quiet evening, after Leo had gone to bed, Julian and Amelia sat on the terrace of their new home, overlooking the city lights. "I still can't believe she did this," Julian said, his voice soft, almost reflective. My own aunt, the woman who taught me everything about business, about resilience. Julian reached out, an instinctive gesture, his hand hovering uncertainly between them. Then he let it drop. Clenching his fist, I understand, he said, his voice husky, filled with a newfound empathy. He didn't fully understand. Not yet. But he was beginning to. The enormity of her sacrifice, the depth of her fear, the sheer resilience it must have taken to endure alone, it hit him with a profound impact. He had lived in a world of power and privilege, oblivious to the quiet strength it took to survive what she had faced. She was protective, Amelia offered, but her love was twisted by her ambition. She wanted you to be powerful, unencumbered by anything she perceived as a weakness. And a family she didn't approve of, a child not of her choosing, was simply an obstacle to be removed. Just then, Leo finished his drawing. He looked up, his bright eyes moving from his mother's tear-streaked face to Julian's grim expression. He seemed to sense the shift in the emotional landscape, his innocent curiosity now tinged with a subtle unease. Mr. Vance, do you like my new design for the power converter? He asked, holding up his notepad with innocent enthusiasm, completely unaware of the earthquake he had just caused. The entire foundation of their lives shifting beneath their feet. Julian nodded slowly. I see that now. It's a bitter pill to swallow. All those years, thinking I was invincible, when in reality, I was a pawn in her game. He turned to Amelia, his eyes earnest. I am so sorry, Amelia, for everything, for the pain she caused you, for the years I wasn't there for Leo. I know I can't get those years back, but I promise you, I will do everything in my power to be the father he deserves and to support you in every way possible. Julian looked at the complex sketch, then at Leo's expectant face, and finally, at Amelia, her eyes still raw with emotion but holding a glint of steel. The truth had begun to unravel, exposing a painful, shocking past, a monstrous betrayal by someone he trusted implicitly. But it had also brought him face to face with his son, a genius child, a living testament to a love he barely remembered, but now felt deeply in his soul. The confrontation had only just begun, but the true battle was yet to come, not just for Leo, but for the truth, and for the family that had been ripped apart by a cruel, calculated betrayal. The pieces were now on the table, and the game had irrevocably changed. Amelia met his gaze, a faint smile gracing her lips. He needs you, Julian, more than he knows. And I think we can build something new from this. Something real. The words were tentative, but the meaning was profound. The silence in the opulent conference room stretched, heavy and suffocating, before Julian finally broke it. His eyes, fixed on Amelia, were no longer accusatory, but alight with a terrifying, cold fury. Eleanor. The name tasted like ash in his mouth. His aunt, who had been a second mother to him, who had molded him into the man he was revealed not as a protector, but as a puppeteer. The carefully constructed world of logic and order he had lived in for years imploded, replaced by a visceral understanding of a profound, personal betrayal. The public exposure, the legal repercussions, and Eleanor's devastating downfall served a crucial purpose beyond mere retribution. It cleared Julian's name, reaffirming his integrity in the corporate world. It vindicated Amelia, publicly acknowledging her innocence and strength. Most importantly, it affirmed Leo's rightful place, not as a secret, but as the celebrated son of Julian Vance, a prodigy with a clear lineage and a bright, secure future. Eleanor, he repeated, the name barely a whisper, yet vibrating with controlled rage. She engineered this. He looked at Leo, still innocent, still drawing, and the pain of the lost years intensified, sharp and unbearable. All these years, because of her. The truth had been painful, the confrontation brutal, but the justice served was complete. The veil of deceit had been ripped away, exposing the darkness beneath, but also revealing the resilient bonds of family and the quiet strength of two individuals who had endured and ultimately triumphed. A new chapter was beginning, free from the shadows of betrayal, paving the way for a future built on honesty, love, and the promise of new beginnings. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was clear, and they would walk it together. Amelia, her own raw emotions still near the surface, saw the devastation in Julian's eyes, It was a mirror to her own long-held agony. She was very convincing. "Julian," she said, her voice softer now, devoid of its earlier defensiveness. "She had a way of making me believe that you genuinely wanted me gone, that you were disgusted by the idea of any lasting connection. She painted a picture of a life I was not fit for, a life that would destroy me if I tried to cling to it, and I was young, foolish, and truly terrified of what your family's power could do." In the quiet aftermath of the storm, as the public outcry subsided and Eleanor Vance receded into a disgraced silence, Julian, Amelia, and Leo found themselves standing on the threshold of a new life. The grand, sprawling house Julian had quietly acquired for them was no longer just a secure haven. It was transforming into a home filled with the comfortable clutter of Leo's scientific experiments, the scent of Amelia's home cooking, and the profound, unfamiliar warmth of a nascent family. Julian pushed himself back from the table, pacing the room with restless energy. "And what about me? What did she tell me?" He remembered the vague, insidious narrative Eleanor had spun. Amelia was a schemer, an opportunist, interested only in his family's wealth. He had been told she disappeared because she was ashamed, because her true colors had been revealed. The narrative had felt plausible enough to his younger, more naive self. Eager to believe the strong, guiding hand of his aunt, he had built his empire on the very foundation of avoiding such emotional vulnerabilities, and Eleanor had masterfully ensured he sealed off that particular wound. Convinced he had dodged a bullet, Julian, once a man consumed by the relentless pursuit of power and the calculated precision of the corporate world, found his priorities irrevocably shifted. The corner office at Vance Industries, once his sanctuary, now felt less compelling than the evenings spent in Leo's makeshift lab, watching his son's brilliant mind at work. He enrolled in parenting classes, devoured books on child development, and sought advice from Amelia, who patiently guided him through the nuances of raising an extraordinary child. He learned to differentiate between a tantrum born of frustration and one caused by overstimulation from Leo's hyper-perceptive mind. He learned to listen, truly listen, to the complex questions Leo posed about the universe, and to the simpler, yet equally profound, questions about his day at school. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. The private investigators who had been digging into Amelia's past were now given a new, chilling directive. Every detail of Eleanor Vance's movements, communications, and financial transactions from 7 years ago, particularly those involving private investigators or legal firms specializing in non-disclosure agreements. He wanted every phone record, every email, every meeting agenda. He would tear down his own family to uncover the truth. The ruthlessness he usually reserved for hostile corporate takeovers was now directed inward, at the very core of his family. The transformation in Julian was subtle but profound. The sharp edges of his corporate persona softened, replaced by a warmth that only Leo could evoke. He found immense joy in the simplest things, teaching Leo how to throw a baseball in the sprawling backyard, reading him bedtime stories often from advanced physics textbooks, at Leo's insistence, or simply watching him solve a complex puzzle with breathtaking speed. He made it a point to attend Leo's school functions, his imposing presence no longer solely linked to corporate power, but to the quiet pride of a father. He also dedicated significant resources from Vance Industries to establishing a foundation for gifted children, ensuring that other young prodigies would have the opportunities and support Leo had once lacked. This was not just philanthropy, it was a personal mission, a way to redeem the lost years. Leaving Leo briefly in the care of Mr. Harrison, Julian ushered Amelia into a private office. He needed answers, and he needed them now, before the magnitude of the truth fully registered with the child. "Amelia, tell me everything. Every word she said, every threat. I need to know the full extent of her deception." Amelia, too, blossomed in this new environment. The constant financial strain, the gnawing fear of discovery, had lifted, allowing her to breathe freely for the first time in years. She had once been defined by her struggle, by her fierce determination to protect Leo alone. Now, she had a partner, a true co-parent who shared her burdens and celebrated her son's triumphs. She pursued her own passions, enrolling in a master's program in educational psychology. Driven by her desire to understand and support children like Leo, she became an advocate for innovative learning approaches. her quiet strength and first-hand experience making her a compelling voice. Her relationship with Julian, initially a fragile truce built on shared trauma, slowly deepened into mutual respect, understanding, and a quiet, abiding affection. They found comfort in each other's presence, sharing stories from their day, their worries, and their dreams. For Leo, the scars of the past remained, but they were no longer gaping wounds. They were reminders of what they had overcome, together. Amelia recounted the painful details: Eleanor's imposing presence, her calm but chilling threats to destroy Amelia's academic future and reputation, to ensure she would never get a job anywhere, and ultimately, to make sure she lost custody of her child if she dared to reveal the paternity. She described the legal documents, seemingly ironclad, that Eleanor had presented, emphasizing the severe penalties for breach of contract. "She paid me off, Julian," Amelia said, her voice trembling again. "A paltry sum for my silence. But it was enough to survive, to put a roof over Leo's head for a little while. She made it seem like it was your idea, that you wanted to wipe me clean from your life, and that the money was your final disgusted payment." Leo, once a secret, now thrived openly, his genius nurtured within a loving and stable home. He continued to astound his parents and his new mentors with his intellect, delving into new fields with insatiable curiosity. He designed advanced robotics, conceptualized sustainable energy solutions, and even began composing complex musical pieces, his creativity boundless. But beyond his intellectual pursuits, Leo was learning what it meant to be a child. He made friends, learned to ride a bike, and discovered the simple joys of ice cream and comic books. Julian and Amelia ensured he had a balanced life, encouraging play and social interaction as much as academic rigor. He started calling Julian Dad, tentative at first, then with growing confidence, a word that resonated deep in Julian's soul, filling a void he hadn't known existed. Julian listened, his face a mask of escalating horror. He recognized the insidious psychological manipulation Eleanor was capable of, the way she could twist words and situations to serve her own agenda. It was the same subtle art of persuasion she used in the boardroom, but turned on her own flesh and blood. His aunt, who prided herself on protecting the Vance lineage, had actually severed a vital branch, all to maintain her version of control and legacy. Eleanor Vance, stripped of her titles and power, faded into obscurity. The legal battles continued, but without her corporate influence or public support, she was a shadow of her former self, facing the full force of justice for her actions. She lived out her days in isolation, her empire of control having crumbled into dust, a stark lesson in the corrupting nature of unchecked ambition. Her story served as a silent warning within the Vance empire, a reminder that power untempered by ethics would inevitably lead to ruin. She always believed that any romantic involvement outside of certain elite circles would dilute the Vance bloodline, taint the family name, Julian explained, his voice hollow. "She saw me as the sole torchbearer after my parents. She probably viewed you as an unacceptable variable, a threat to her meticulous plans for my future. For the family, the realization was nauseating. Eleanor hadn't just separated them, she had deliberately engineered a void in his life, a silent absence that had reverberated for years. The path to their new beginning had been fraught with pain, betrayal, and a dramatic confrontation. But it had led them to each other, to a truth that was both shocking and liberating. Julian, Amelia, and Leo, once disparate pieces scattered by deceit, had been reassembled into a family, stronger and more resilient for the trials they had faced. Julian had found the true meaning of wealth not in billions, but in the laughter of his son and the quiet strength of the woman beside him. Amelia had found not just security, but partnership and a love that honored her resilience. And Leo, the genius baby, had found what every child truly needs: a home, a loving family, and the freedom to be truly, gloriously himself. Their story was a testament to the enduring power of truth, the profound impact of love, and the relentless pursuit of justice, even against the most formidable of adversaries. While Julian's world crumbled, Eleanor Vance sat in her sprawling estate, a picture of aristocratic calm. She was hosting a charity luncheon, effortlessly gliding through the room, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her silk dress exuding an aura of old money and untouchable power. But beneath the serene facade, a faint tremor of unease rippled. Julian had been uncharacteristically quiet since the innovation showcase. He hadn't called, hadn't scheduled their usual weekly strategic meeting. That was unlike him. Julian was a creature of habit, a precision instrument. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, resilience, and unexpected family, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next dramatic tale. We love hearing from you. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And while you're here, why not check out some of our other videos? There's always more to explore. Her network, a vast web of old money contacts and discreet informers, had sent her whispers. Julian had been seen at the Rising Stars section, lingering, observing. Then the unusual background checks he had initiated, not on a competitor, not on a potential acquisition, but on an obscure young woman named Amelia Hayes and her son. The name, like a splinter, dug into Eleanor's meticulously ordered mind.